John, thanks for joining me. We've been hanging out here for a bit, chatting. I decided to bring in people that I really admire in the industry just to have conversations and to use my friends' studio spaces for free to record all of them. So I'm taking advantage of the relationships I've built over the years. I think it's like part of like the second half of my career where I'm like, I know some really awesome people. Why don't I talk to them more? So that's
I love to talk.
So maybe I'll create a podcast and I'll call Hank Talks to Awesome People. But not named yet. You're the first guest on whatever this is, and so happy to have you here.
Well, thanks.
Known you forever. Really respect what you do. Wanted to talk to you today a little bit about your career, how you got to where you are, what you do every day, and like what's going on in the world. So tell me let's start off with like, how did you get into cybersecurity? I keep saying that word. How did you get into cybersecurity, infosec, security? How did you get into it? Like, tell us about your beginnings.
Well, like you, I started out in the Army. I was a reservist. I was in college. I guess I actually started before my junior year. In senior year of high school, you go to basic training. It was this weird program.
While you were in high school?
While you're in high school. And then so you come back to high school and
really?
You're like in a reserve unit. Yeah, it was so bizarre. So I mean, like if you're like 17 and you know, like it was terrifying. Basic training was terrifying for me. I don't know if it's like that.
Yeah.
I was just so young. But the good news is, you know, I got this like early start, and you graduate high school and you go to your AIT, which for me was civil affairs. Us and the psychological operations used to go to like the school together and brag. And then I went to college, and so I guess I got like 2 semesters in, and then September 11th happened, and I was, you know, Afghanistan. Then we were in Iraq shortly after that, and
you were 18 at that point.
I was like, yeah, I think I turned 21 in Afghanistan. It was a long time.
Yeah.
But I was super young. But I was, you know, I got to interact with the intelligence folks, and it became pretty clear to me that I was like, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so I moved to DC as soon as I graduated and started working for the ISACs. And I was there for a while, and I was working at a contractor that worked with the ISACs, and the contractor was like, hey, we just got this contract, this cyber contract at the State Department, and we need you to go over there for like a couple weeks, and you're just going to edit papers. That's all you're going to do. You're going to be the tech editor. And I'm there. After I first saw it, I was like, don't send me. I don't know anything about cyber stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a terrible idea. But they sent me anyway. And I went over there, and I'm editing these papers. And it was the coolest stuff I've ever read. Like, it's like this new Cold War going on. There's like all these different threat actors that they're seeing on networks. And I was like, this is fascinating. So I literally started writing my own papers, reports, and convinced them to let me stay. And so at some point, I became the sort of Russia hand in this office, and just kind of fell backwards into it. And so I was there for quite a while, and then came work with you at DIA, same problem set, and then eventually moved along to a company called Eyesight Partners, and our job or what we wanted to do was essentially plant these threats sort of outside the government, which was, you know, I don't know if we totally knew how we were going to do it at first, but we eventually learned how to track cyber espionage, right? And that's, you know, where I gravitated towards, and I kind of led that mission. And then we were eventually acquired by FireEye, which is FireEye Mandiant, and then, you know, and then eventually acquired by Google, which is where we are now.
Whole nother hour-long session to talk about being a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old PSYOP dude in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Like that's an interesting. It must have been tons of interesting things you saw there going.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah.
So you could work for multiple ISACs at the same time back then?
So it's like a contractor that ran, I think, a bunch of different ones simultaneously.
Okay.
And the mission was pretty similar, like across all of them. They were all, you know, counterterrorism focused, and so, you know, it was an idea. You know, it was something you could probably pretty easily aggregate some of the you know the expertise around. But at the time, I was looking at things like how are people getting I kid you not, getting bombs on the trains, right? Mm-hmm. And looking at sort of from a global perspective, what the next big threat would be.
Right.
And it was kind of interesting, but a weird job, but kind of forced me to stretch a lot of muscles, like like how do I look for strange things out there that have relevant to this customer.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty valuable that way.
So you end up at Eyesight. It's acquired by Mandiant.
Yeah.
You're at Mandiant, world famous cybersecurity company, especially for its intelligence capabilities. Then more recently, Mandiant gets acquired by Google.
Yeah.
You're now the what's your title?
Chief Analyst.
Chief Analyst.
Yeah.
For a place that has probably more data than anybody in the whole world.
Yeah, they got a lot of data. Yeah.
More data, a lot of data. This is a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so as an analyst, that's great.
Yeah. Right.
Plus, the world is on fire. There's lots to analyze. Yeah. So what? Tell us about your job. Like, what do you? People ask me this all the time. They're like, "How do you get into cyber? How do you become a VC? What do you do every day?" And it's like, okay, I'm not sitting there banging on keyboards like fighting people. That's not what I do. There's a lot of roles. There's a lot of jobs in cyber that aren't that.
Yeah.
They're the intelligence function drives operations in the military, it drives operations in cyber. Tell us about what that is that your team does. Like, how do you manage that chaos?
So I like to think I sit at the front of all knowledge, right? So Mandiant Intel we've got hundreds of analysts like working all kinds of problems. It's really crazy. So we have I have experts on Iran and cyber, and then we have experts on ICS threats, vulnerabilities, just about any kind of problem you can think of, and with people all over the world, and they're all sort of digging at the very lowest level, like into these problems. And I used to do that, right? I used to, I was sort of tasked for a limited problem, and that's just not what I am anymore, right? And I have to sort of keep up that bird's eye view of these things so I can answer big questions from customers, from my bosses, and sort of coordinate when really hits the fan. Like the big crises. I'm almost always highly involved in those, like the situation now in the Middle East, for the Ukraine elections, things like that. But the best part of my job is I get to go and ask these analysts what they think about this or that, and it's awesome because I can get on the phone with somebody who is, basically, the government, like the equivalent of the government guy who's been sitting in his skiff reading somebody's, stuff all day long. And this guy knows everything about this problem, and they get to sort of school me on it. And I spent a lot of time sort of distilling that stuff for the messaging that's going out.
Yeah. So what are the kind of stuff that your customers are looking for? So you have all these analysts, some deep dive in certain areas. You're up here at the top orchestrating the analysis, aggregating the information. Like what's like an example of like a crisis situation, the type of things your customers are looking for?
Well, I think there's like from strategic down to tactical. There's a lot of different things people are looking for. At the strategic level, right? They want to know when this situation kicks off. How's it going to affect? Like, who is it going to affect? Mm-hmm. Right. So if you take the Ukraine situation, right? So we tried to essentially distill or take the lessons we'd already learned in Ukraine, which were significant, and talk to the people that explain to people, some of you are more likely to be targeted as a result of this than others. If you're in the defense industry, absolutely, right? If you are, retailer, it's possible, but it's far less likely. This is the problem. Actually, this problem over here is probably more important to you. And the point is like everybody's got limited resources in this business, and everybody, like in my experience, a lot of people lack focus, right? ransomware is a bigger problem than a lot of these state actors to a lot of our customers, right? And I hope that I can arm them with enough information for them to actually turn the ship
Right.
of their giant security apparatus to make sure that their ship is aimed towards the right threats.
Like you're a retailer in the Midwest, like you may not be worried about like the IRGC coming after you,
Yeah.
but some cyber criminal gang out of somewhere else with using ransomware.
Absolutely,
Like
yeah.
that's, stay focused, keep your eye on this ball. Can't say with 100% certainty that's what's going to happen, but with a high degree of probability, that's what you need to be
And
concerned with.
that's the strategic problem, right? And so it's a really great outcomes for them. One is that they can start building controls for that problem, and two, they can even get budget for that problem, right? So if I say this is your problem, so like, okay, well, do we have the controls? Do we need to get a budget? You can usually actually take this intelligence and use it, as part of that process. But let's say that I tell a host of companies that for whatever reason the Middle Eastern situation is going to affect them, right? And they're shifting the ship or moving the ship in that direction to sort of prepare for that. The second question is like, how do we prepare the controls? And there's a lot of tactical pieces to that. So on the tactical level, right, I want to know who the adversaries are that are in play, right? So whether, in the situation like the Middle East, there could be Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. They're definitely all in play. And what tactics, techniques, and procedures they're using so that you can actually fine tune those controls and even detections, right? Like I can take, okay, well, here's the actor. How do we detect? Can we detect on most of the stuff that we're doing? And we can literally all the way down to detection level, start actually preparing for that actor. What's really cool about this space is, and there are people who will tell you that you have to defend against everything, right? And there's some limited truth to that, but like at the beginning of the Ukrainian war, the invasion, we were telling folks like the top threat actor is going to be Sandworm, right? This is the Russian GRU, and we have been absolutely correct. You can take all that stuff and then distill it down to one threat actor and start asking how does that threat actor operate,
Right.
and are you prepared for it? And that's the beauty of this problem. Still, there aren't so many teams that we are surprised every day when we go into Mandiant goes into a network, and does that remediation. They're not so many teams that they're like every day it's a brand new team.
Yeah.
That's often one that we've seen before, right? And that means that this problem is sort of like knowable.
And you've seen them before. There's enough of a signature there
Yeah.
to say like this is definitely the same entity.
And that's like our advantage, right? We can actually like start to know these actors, right?
And you're really confident in that, like that's.
In some cases, not all cases,
Yeah.
but we have that's a big part of what we do is this concept of sort of clustering actors. It's like almost the backbone of a lot of our activity, right? And of course we do that with a lot of these incident responses, and we have thousands of these clusters, many of which we suspect are the same actors that sort of transformed over time, but we're still able to see, like in a short period of time, multiple incidents and connect them together. I'd like to think it's like a detective at a bunch of crime scenes.
Yeah.
It's like, oh well, there's that, size 13, footprint, and or something like that gives this actor away. But we're definitely in this amazing place where we can connect the dots between all these incidents and learn about these adversaries.
Yeah. What do you think I think people don't understand just how much of this is being done by proxies globally for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's hard to put a number on it, but back in before we're in the new Cold War and in the Cold War of the last century, you were able to basically say like there were militaries and they had uniforms and they were like the bad guys and then you're the good guys over here on this side. Like what percentage of this like crime through state-sponsored activity would you say is being done by proxies for states and for criminal groups, and they maybe like farm themselves out to They maybe don't just work for one bad actor; they work for multiple bad actors.
Well, that's the beauty of the underground is that like everything is for sale. So at the very basic level, if you are a foreign player, right, like a nation state, you can just go in and buy literally anything you need, like from tools to access. There is an entire marketplace where these actors literally just show up and say, I have access to this.
Why don't people go in and take down these marketplaces?
Well, for one, a lot of them are operating out of Russia now, and Russia's not going to play ball probably
No, you don't think so?
anytime soon. It was actually looking like that was a possibility for a while there. I don't know how genuine they were, but I think now that the war has set us at such odds, I think that's unlikely to happen. I think that these actors are operating out of safe haven like they've never had before. But they also owe Russia like for the protection, right? And so you can pretty much expect like that. By the way, since the invasion's begun, I've never seen so much evidence of criminal / Russian state like collusion. It's everywhere. All the major players that we track, we keep seeing these little pieces of evidence that suggest that they're playing together. And it could start with like literally there's an actor that we see that we know is essentially developing accesses for the criminal underground. So they'll gain access to something and then just sell it, and then somebody else will actually do all the work. We can see like Russian APT actors leveraging that actor's access. So either that person's handing them over when he says, oh, this is definitely going to be of interest to them, or they're selling them to them.
So proxies, they're like how does that really work? Like so they may be working for multiple entities at the same time?
Well, so aside from like buying the stuff in the underground, I think that there is this like Faustian bargain, right, that goes on where you're essentially protected by the services, the security services, in return for, when we come knocking, you're going to play ball, right? And we actually have a really good story of this. So the Yahoo incident that happened a long time ago, there was an indictment, and it has like the full story of like how one of these situations played out. And these FSB officers were working with this guy. They had an Interpol red notice out for him. He's like as wanted as you could possibly be. And they basically approached him and offered to keep him out of jail in return for him hitting Yahoo. So this guy is hitting Yahoo. He's like doing like little espionage stuff for them. And at the same time, he's doing his criminal stuff, which they seem to completely condone. They don't have a problem with this guy making money.
Probably even more so now, right? Like they're just...
It's so the situation's
so
even
chaos.
So and you just think like they what's interesting is like the FSB, who's one of the players, right, the cyber players, who's always been a major threat, has a mission to gather intelligence, and they also have a mission to do law enforcement. So you can see like what a beautiful
works out perfectly
situation it is for them. And nobody wants to go to Russian jail,
right?
Or end up on the front lines.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
That's a real possibility now. Ending up on the front lines might be worse than jail.
Yeah, I think so.
So like we're in this situation now where there's potentially this new axis that people talk about amongst major power players and a near peer competition in military. We talk a lot about Russia. We can talk about China here in a second. The issue of the day right now is like, what is Iran doing behind the scenes in the Middle East to support Hamas, Hezbollah, whomever else, the Houthi rebels? I don't know, you name it. There's so many different players in the region. What are you guys kind of seeing happening there right now?
So, Hezbollah, Hamas, Iran, they all have pretty active cyber programs. Hamas, we've seen for a long time, for instance, carrying out intrusions. Mostly focused on Israeli military, government types, and the Palestinian Authority, Fatah. They target them as well. Most of the activity is designed. I think a lot of the activity we've seen seems to be designed to, target individuals, and could have some serious like physical security implications for those individuals, right? For instance, at one point, I think they were trying to basically identify and get on the systems of Israeli soldiers, and so that's of course a scenario that we're concerned about now. Iran is another, a huge player, in the Middle East. A lot of their activity focused on the Gulf and on Israel. They've been in a sort of a low-level cyber conflict that predates all this activity. And what they essentially, we see them doing is doing a kind of a mixture of destructive, sort of using ransomware, but not necessarily it's like ransomware that you can't unlock. So it's basically destructive attack, and then hack and leaks. And sometimes they claim that it's like a pro-Iranian hacktivist that's doing it. Sometimes it's like they claim that it's a criminal, and sometimes they claim that they're Arabs.
Yeah.
But they are essentially, creating these personas, to take these proxy personas to sort of take credit for all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's going on right now, there as well. There's definitely a couple of actors that we suspect are potentially Iranian, potentially tied to the state, carrying out intrusions and attacks.
So they try to obfuscate their, just like any intelligence operation forever, as much as possible, who they are, and make maybe even sort of purport to be something that they're not.
It's like a deniability thing.
Yeah.
It's weird because it's not that they're unattributable in almost every case, and this goes for like all the stuff that we see. It's not necessarily about not being able to figure out who it is. It's about them being able to say, "Oh, you can't prove it."
Yeah, right. Just enough there.
Yeah.
So that's a flashpoint. The Middle East. I would say arguably, like from where I sit, I guess there's tons of concern behind the Russia threat. There's tons of concern behind the Iranian threat, but really like the biggest threat out there, if there were to be like especially if you're talking about military on military threat, it's the China-U.S. threat. From where I sit also, they've kind of evolved. Tell me if this is true. Their cyber capabilities evolved from being sort of very brute force, like we'll bang your door down, come in, we don't really care if they're us, to a very sophisticated operation that's in support of everything else they're doing, both offensively and from an espionage capability. Like, what's going on with the China threat right now?
Well, they're just not the actor that we tracked a million years ago. That was sort of, we call it smash and grab, doing smash and grab attacks. It's a totally new game. So back in the day, it wasn't unusual for them to come out of like home range or a single proxy and then screw up every now and then and come out of home range. And then literally they would be coming out of like the building right next to the Technical Reconnaissance Bureau that they belonged to.
Right, so it was like 100% it was them.
Yeah, it was just blatantly obvious. And then they would focus heavily on social engineering, which was, back in the day, not very good. And they would just spray and pray and try to hit somebody that would, that would open something. It's just totally different now. So, they're just not, they're just put so much organization clearly and structure to this whole thing, and they're very concerned, I think, about being caught and worried about stealth, and that's just wasn't the case in the past. So we're seeing them target, edge infrastructure, which is particularly security devices, which is they are doing that with 0 days in some cases. Finding other vulnerabilities, their older vulnerability. Oh, sorry.
The older vulnerabilities, yeah.
Older vulnerabilities in other cases.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they're really staying off the radar, because when you're sending all these emails, right, the social engineering, it was just really loud. Mm-hmm. It's just not the case anymore, especially when you're doing it with a 0 day. And we found that 1 0 day, they can have tremendous effect, hitting like 1,000 good, like high value targets at once. They're also their command and control, or their like infrastructure is totally different, right? You know, they used to come out of home range. Now these guys are coming through these proxies, this proxy network of a botnet network. And mostly these are like compromised small office, like home office routers.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, if I wanted to hit this building, I go and find a router in Arlington, right? And I come through locally, and it's just like a huge innovation. And also, it's like completely ethereal. So I'll just use another router next time.
Right.
And for me trying to track this, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's crazy. And they're sophisticated enough to do that and figure out how to do that. And there's two other areas I wanted to talk to you about. Like, and one is sort of like North Korea, always kind of like looming in the background. Like, what the heck are these guys doing? They do a lot with a little. I feel like. Is a way of describing it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think somebody, Dmitry Perovich called it like Juche, like cyber, and it's definitely like they're like, we're going to do everything everything ourselves sort of mentality, and it's absolutely the case. What's really wild about them, and we've seen, you know, they do espionage, they do attack, right? Obviously, they've carried out a lot of major sort of disruptive attacks. But the big game for them now is crypto.
Mm-hmm.
These guys are the apex predators in the crypto space. They have stolen, I think, billions of dollars out of that space. They knock over exchanges. They've got their own schemes, that like all kinds of strange schemes that they are running. They had an NFT scheme that they had figured out at some point. Just incredibly like criminal innovators in that space, and that's a real concern because that money is going back and funding their nuclear weapons program.
Right.
I think the White House said that like over half the money coming in for their missile program is coming out of these thefts, and they're just putting a lot of it like energy there. It's fun, like. When they first started doing this, they were also, by the way, knocking over banks. You know, there's like a big bank heist that was connected to the North Koreans. I think at some point they realized that the crypto was a smarter use of their time, because those banks took them like years to I think we take like a year for them to actually pull off the heist, and it's just like faster hit these targets.
Do you think they're also involved in like potentially in like crypto pump and dump schemes?
I think there's no end to the amount of
schemes whatever it takes.
They recognize the value, and they are innovating, and they're pretty smart. I mean, like and like the list of schemes is huge. Yeah. So I have no doubt that they're doing that. I also think they were probably a massive investor. Yeah. And probably made a lot of money that way. We see them like that even the teams that are like espionage focused, they have sort of the classic mission. They're now being told, go fund yourself. These guys are making money. You can do it too. And so we see them doing ransomware operations to get their hands on the crypto too. Right. And the other thing that's really wild that we're seeing from these actors lately has been these IT workers. So they essentially are going out and falsifying their papers and getting jobs in the tech world, or attempting to get jobs in the tech world, where they're essentially like the ultimate insider threat.
So this is like a technically adept person in Pyongyang, North Korea, that falsifies papers and applies for jobs around the world.
All over the world, and they're, and apparently they are very skilled. They have a wide array of programming skills, to include like the DeFi related skills. Yeah. And I think one of our major concerns is they're trying to get their hands on that crypto that way. Yeah. As sort of an insider threat.
Yeah, and the talent, the war on talent is real. Yeah. And like, hey, this is a super smart guy. I'll take him. It looks like he's in South Korea and he's really in North Korea or whatever.
It's that simple. Yeah.
Well, I guess there's a million other global threats out there, but the last one to touch on today is just criminal gangs. Some of these folks we already touched on because they work for these nation states, but then some of them just kind of work on their own. I know you and I were chatting about the MGM situation recently.
Yeah, that one's a particularly tough one. It's a huge focus of ours. This group, the group behind that, looks to be young English-speaking criminals who, could very well be in the United States. And
they sound like they're native speakers.
They're native speakers, and their real skill, that makes like the big difference is they're excellent at the social engineering, right? Like they have proven that you can do amazing things with social engineering if even if you lack some of the other skills, and they're not unskilled in some of the other capabilities, but the really transformative piece of this is their ability to get online with somebody and convince them whatever they need to convince them, right? And so we've seen on multiple occasions help desks, for instance, who are supposed to sort of guard these systems have been overly helpful. And you'll see them basically pulling these guys through these like gates that we've set up. Like, does he have this? No, sorry, we can't give you this. And they're like being overly helpful and pulling these people through. And they've really demonstrated a weakness in that process that we have to address now.
So the social engineering skills come in when you can really purport to be, you leave your virtual world of talking to somebody over chat or whatever, or just, hacking your way into something. Whereas you get to a certain gate and you say, I need to call up somebody at the IT center of this place and get them to, so you socially engineer them to allow you to have the additional access that you need, and you kind of wormhole your way around the whole thing.
Absolutely, pretending to be somebody, convinced, acting exasperated, like, I've had the craziest, worst day. Can you help me out?
And just enough about the organization.
Just enough. Yeah. And we can literally hear them on LinkedIn in the background looking up information.
Oh, like in real time.
Yeah. Oh. About that's where we suspect, like anywhere they can get their hands on this kind of information.
Yeah.
Right. So they're definitely piecing together enough to create a story, but the biggest thing is that they know how to emote. Right, that like it's not just being able to speak the language. A lot of threat actors can do that. They can sound exasperated. They can sound like they could make somebody want to help them.
And there's real business impacts from that. It's my understanding that the combination of Marriott and MGM in Las Vegas in their hotels has been pushed off until next year as a result of this. I mean, it was supposed to be happening It was supposed to happen in October. And so the business impacts are real, and that's.
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
they were down for days. The gambling industry, the hotel industry, and then you're talking about delaying a merger as a result of a cyber event. All sorts of firsts.
Those are huge impacts.
Well, this was excellent. I'm looking forward to coming to Cyber WarCon next week. This hopefully this is out for this is Cyber WarCon socks. John hosts an amazing conference every year here in Arlington, Virginia called Cyber WarCon. And it's really, truly like actual cyber operators come to it and people that are really involved in cybersecurity. So I'm looking forward to that, catching up with friends. And thanks to N2K for hosting us and allowing us to use their beautiful offices here in Arlington, Virginia, just outside Washington, D.C. And hope to get back with you soon and we can deep dive into young John Hultquist, a PSYOP dude, and to talk about, let's say 6 months from now, let's do this again, talk about what the world looks like. Hopefully it's a safer place, but I doubt that's going to be the case.
Yeah. Let's hope. Yeah.
So, thanks again, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.